Hi, I'm Tom Spiggle with the Spiggle Law Firm, where we help women who've been wrongfully fired or afraid that they might be. Today, I want to talk to you about something very important that just happened earlier this morning, and that is guidance from the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, about what the ADA requires regarding the coronavirus at work. Prior to this video, we provided several pieces that talked about what your rights were to stay home. Today, as an employee, I want to talk to you about what your rights are at work if you want to stay there and your employer is asking you for certain information. And I encourage you to take a look at this document. This is designed for employers. It's important information for them, but it also provides good information for an employee, particularly when you're getting requests for health-related information from your employer and where that line is. And the title of this is Pandemic Preparedness in the Workplace and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Let's presume that you don't want to stay home. You don't have a need to telecommute. You want to come into your office for any number of reasons. You don't feel sick, you get better work done when you're actually in the office. So this is a different situation. What can your employer ask of you related to the coronavirus, which has now been called by the World Health Organization as a pandemic? For instance, can they ask you questions about your health? And let's say they're motivated by a good intent. They want to know if your immune system has potentially weak, because that would leave you to being susceptible to the coronavirus. Can they ask that? Generally, the answer is no. Now, let me say a lot of these questions depend on, it's going to change day to day. It's going to depend on what organizations like the CDC or state health departments are saying about the strength of the coronavirus and how serious the threat is. If the company is relying on objective information coming from the CDC that the virus has gotten really aggressive, it may change what they can ask of you. But generally, they cannot come to you and ask you questions that would involve you disclosing your health-related information, because it's no business of theirs. You know, if they can't ask you, do you have AIDS? Do you have multiple sclerosis? Are you immune system compromised? They can't ask you those questions because it would involve disclosure of that information. So generally, they cannot do that. Similarly, most employers cannot require medical testing except in very limited circumstances. So for instance, they can't require you to take your temperature. You know, your HR department can't come up with those little things they put on your forehead and ask you to take their temperature, unless the CDC or some state department has issued guidance that the virus has gotten so dangerous that transmission could be a direct threat to others in the organization. In those situations, it could be possible. An employer can, however, if you are displaying symptoms, you're coughing, you're sneezing, that suggest that you may have the coronavirus or some sort of illness, they can ask you to go home. That is something that is allowed. They can also ask employees questions not designed to elicit, not designed to encourage you to divulge health-related information. So for instance, they could give you a list of questions, just asking you to answer yes or no to these three questions. Would your ability to come to work be affected by school closings, inability to take public transport, or closing of the court system or some other government agency? Those would be questions that your employer could ask you because they don't elicit health-related information. What if you voluntarily disclose that information to your employer because you're worried? You go to your employer and you say, hey, look, I've got, say, multiple sclerosis. I just want you to know because I could be susceptible to this. Well, then you voluntarily disclose that. Your employer can, of course, they can't unhear that. They can accept that information. They have to keep it in a separate place. But know that this is going to change on a day-by-day basis. There may be things that your employer can't do today with Americans with Disabilities Act that they will be able to do next week, depending on what the CDC says or health departments say. Also keep in mind that this guidance in the Americans with Disabilities Act only applies to employers with 15 or more employees. So if you work for a smaller organization, some of these things could be perfectly legal. they can ask you these questions. They can, say, hey, you gotta show me you've got a normal temperature before you come in. So smaller employers, these regulations do not apply, something to consider. So get educated, stay safe, and we wish you the best. If you have any questions, you of course call our office. We've got many calls coming in. Our attorneys are happy to talk to you about it.